What's up, y'all? You're watching Union Minded. I'm your host, Eric, and today I want to talk to you about salting and a bill that the House introduced to increase salting reporting to the Department of Labor. This is straight out of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I will put the article in the description box. On March 21st, Rep. Burgess Owens introduced the Start Applying Labor Transparency Act in the U.S. House of Representatives. The legislation would improve reporting on union salting, a deceptive practice sometimes employed during union organizing campaigns. If you don't know, what salting is union organizers getting hired onto non-union jobs and trying to organize the workers on that job to want to unionize that employer. Now, you got to understand the power dynamics between the employer and the employee. And this bill that they want to pass is going to throw a monkey wrench into the ability of employees learning about unions. Because remember one thing, employers constantly propagandize with anti-union videos. They hire union busting firms, and they really put forth maximum effort with money and with hours and trainings to convince their employees that unions are the devil. Assault comes along and has to break through all of that. Now, how is the SALT going to be able to do that if the employer is notified of who the union is using as salting organizers? It affects the IBEW specifically. It affects all unions, but it really has an effect on us as well, especially considering that the IO put out a mandate to organize 250,000 additional electricians because we have a shortage of electricians. Salting is one of the techniques that we use to be able to organize electricians into the IBEW locals. So it's kind of a direct attack. And you should also be noted, I looked into Burgess Owens' financials, and he is supported exclusively by big business, by contractors. Miller and Long, for crying out loud, spent 15 grand on this seat. This is what I mean when I tell you our government is bought and paid for. Burgess Owens, Republican out of Utah, introduces the Start Applying Labor Transparency Act after receiving his campaign contributions 100% from big business and wealthy corporations. That is a paid-for seat. Rep. Burgess Owens does not represent the people of Utah. He represents the businesses of Utah. They have purchased that seat. That's why I tell you, the fight's not left and right. The fight's up and down, because all the folks at the top, they're buying up these seats, and there's so few that are actually seats that are representing their constituents. So few. But let's continue. I got on a tangent. Let's continue. As the U.S. Chamber previously observed, salting is an age-old labor technique that may be behind some of the relatively recent unionization efforts at traditionally non-union employers. Dating back at least 100 years, salting refers to the practice of union organizers or trained members applying for a job with an employer for the specific purpose of unionizing the employer's workforce, as opposed to having a legitimate interest in the job for which they apply. In many instances, employers are unaware that they have become the target of salting, and its employees may not realize the person pushing them to support unionization is really working for the union. Let me stop there again. Educating working people that there is a better way and that they're being underpaid for the work that they provide. Our economy is so hyped up on numbers and bullcrap computer generated amounts that companies can fluctuate in billions of dollars in worth in a day over a stock market devaluation. It's propped up. But you know what's the real value? The actual work that's done by workers. So a union organizer gets on there and tells the workers about what they're missing out on, and that's somehow a terrible thing. Yeah, maybe terrible for the owner who is making a killing by underpaying his workers. The SALT Act would address the practice of salting by amending the Labor Management Reporting and Disclosure Act, which Congress enacted in 1959 to improve transparency for employers and labor organizations and guarantee democratic practices for union members. The LMRDA does not currently require reporting from labor unions with respect to their use of salts, and likewise, there is no reporting requirement for salts themselves. In contrast, employers and their labor relations consultants must file reports on their agreements or arrangements. The employer report, known as the Form LM-10, and labor consultant report, the Form LM-20, must include the identities of the parties to the agreement, the object and terms and conditions of the agreement or arrangement, and the activities performed or to be performed pursuant to the agreement. The Form LM-20 must be submitted within 30 days of realizing the agreement. Moreover, receipts and disbursements between the employer and a labor relations consultant must be disclosed on the employer's Form LM-10 or the consultant's Form LM-21. In other words, when employers engage a consultant to navigate around the complexities of a union organizing campaign, that's prettied up language to say when they hire a consultant to help them union bust. Don't be fooled by the prettied up language. Both have to disclose all of those details above. Again, think about the power dynamic. The employer is spending millions of dollars on a consultant. I think it should be reported. Both have to disclose all of those details above, which gives unions particular insight into the employer's approach to the campaign. Unions would do well just to assume that the employer is going to union bust. At the same time, if a labor union sends a SALT, a union organizer or a trained union member, to an employer to convince people from the inside to support the union, there's no reporting requirement, even though the SALT is trying to influence employees just as much as an employer's labor consultant, if not more. Again, we're creating a false equivalency, and we as working people have to be smarter than to fall for it. There is a power dynamic between employer and employee, and it is massively tilt in favor of the employer. To put a union SALT with the power of the employer is ridiculous when you put them on equal footing. It's not equal. The employer gets to hold captive audience meetings and preach their message. The organizer has to go 1-to-1 to 1-to-1 to 1-to-1. This is not an even fight. So it's ridiculous to even make the false comparison. The SALT Act would address this considerable imbalance by requiring reports from labor unions and individuals who act on their behalf as a SALT. This would improve the transparency Congress sought and make it easier for employers to know who they are hiring. Just as importantly, it would enable workers to know if the colleague urging them to join a union is in reality a self-interested activist getting paid by the union itself. Again, this comes from the Chamber of Commerce. So understand that is the Chamber of Businesses. So yes, they support this bill. Yes, they hire politicians to do their bidding. Yes, if you checked Open Secrets and just looked up any politician, you can find out who's paying for their campaign. Yes, this game is more than I like the stuff they say and I like the way they look. It's deeper than that. We have to realize that. My name's Eric. You're watching Union Minded. Remember that the fight's not left and right, it's up and down. It's going to take solidarity to win always. Each one teach one. Get out there and reach one. And remember that there can be no union without you and I front and center. Let's go. Peace.